This is Talking Hardcore, the podcast for people who love hardcore history.
You study history because it allows us to understand the present and prepare for the future.
I'm not trolling.
And I love it.
I'm just pointing out where they're wrong.
The Talking Hardcore podcast is presented by Ace Industrial Solutions. Are you in need of skilled trade professionals for your next project? Look no further. Specializing in commercial and industrial build-outs, floor coatings and coverings, high-speed concrete polish, floor cleaning, shot blasting, painting, energy efficiency, and pallet racking. With a proven track record of excellence, they have become the industry leader. To find out more, please check the link in the description.
This is Talking Hardcore with George
And Scott.
We're here today joined with we're joined today by author Matt Bella. Say hi, Matt.
Hey guys. Hey folks.
You should have said hi, Matt. There was your chance for the lame dad joke. I queued it up. All right.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. You're watching Talking Hardcore. And today we're going to talk about Hardcore History episode 14, Macedonian Soap Opera. I'm not saying Macedonian because it sounds dumb.
Uh-huh.
And we're going to give you some of our thoughts, what we found interesting with it. I'm going to get into a little housekeeping before we get started. What?
Practice.
Stop it. Okay, so October 24th, 10 o'clock. That's this coming Tuesday at 10, depending on when you listen to this, October 24th of 2023 at 10 p.m. We are having a live book club event on the Discord channel. The link's in the description. We're discussing Tom Holland, the historian and author, Tom Holland's PAX book about, Matt, why don't you give him a little description about PAX?
PAX is a very actually exciting overview of the period of time known as the Pax Romana, and Holland breaks it down very, very coolly by the emperors who ruled over it, and then into the war and the peace side of things. The period of history has always been fascinating to me, and I think he tells a great story.
Yeah, he narrates it well. The audiobook is what I listen to, and he reads it himself. So if you're looking for something like that, he's great at that. But otherwise, we're doing that event October 24th, 2023 on the Discord channel and the link in the description. Please join us. There's also going to be a link in the description to finding the book. It's an affiliate link. So if you actually buy the book from that link, they might actually give us a couple cents, I think.
That's nice.
It wouldn't hurt.
No. Cool.
Okay. So you ready to jump into this?
I'm ready.
All right, Matt. You just re-listened to Macedonian Soap Opera. What are your thoughts?
I love, and I've always been fascinated with, the legacy of a man whose generals became kings after he died.
That's a fascinating way to think about it.
Yeah. I mean, this man was so powerful, and he carved out such a portion of the world that when he died, his lieutenants, his generals, the people under his command, became kings who ruled legacies for generations and generations in king's history. This is how much Alexander the Great affected the world in his lifetime, and it was such the mess after his death that Dan really focuses on in this episode, the power dispute over it. I can compare this really quickly.
Well, one second, Matt. 1 second.
Yeah.
I forgot to do this. Episode 14 of Hardcore History is called Macedonian Soap Opera, and it runs through, just to get everybody up to speed in case you didn't listen to it. If you haven't listened to that, go to Dan's website at the link in the description, buy that episode, and listen to it because it's awesome. But he goes through basically the fallout in the ancient world after the death of Alexander the Great. Okay, Go ahead, Matt. Back where you were.
I can compare this really quickly to an episode of the Lex Friedman podcast where he interviewed an American presidential historian scholar. Okay, and they were talking about Lincoln, and the guy said, the problem with Lincoln was the same thing you see with a lot of powerful men who were great men, but they didn't have a good succession plan. And what happened after Lincoln was a lot of bad stuff, you know what I mean? And that's the same thing with Alexander. He had a couple kids, right? Some more legitimate than others according to who would recognize him, according to who they were born by his wives. And then he had his, half brother who was considered to be simple. But then he had these people around him who had fought with him, who had earned the power that he had earned himself, and then they felt a claim to that power as well. And there was no clear line of succession. He had his friend, perhaps lover.
Yeah, but we got to get into this first. The clear line of succession, right? When he's dying, they ask him, "Who do you leave your empire to?" And he says, "The strongest." Right? He didn't want a line of succession. Screw him. He's like, I want whoever deserves it to get it. And the answer is nobody deserved all of it because they didn't get it.
I love that perspective, George. Yeah. Maybe he waited until the last minute and he's like, you know what? This was the plan all along. You guys take it. That's an interesting perspective on the whole thing.
Yeah. But Dan even spells out like when one general started garnering too much power, then the other generals would gang up on him and knock him down to size a little bit. I mean, that's the issue though. So it wasn't more like.
But that's what he was going for. He was going for the idea that if somebody could take it and hold it, then they earned it, and it was theirs.
That was nobody could. Philosophy. That was his whole philosophy about himself. Like he carved out one of the greatest empires the world has ever seen by the strength of his own hand, literally.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty dope.
Can I say something really quick that struck me in listening to this episode?
Please.
Is that Dan loves Olympias, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, he really likes her. He did a whole episode called Thoughts, Glimpses of Olympias. He focuses on powerful women throughout history, and he said this is one of them who we know the most about. Look at all that she achieved. I wish we knew more. He talks about her depiction in popular media. And
Olympias was Alexander's mother.
Yeah.
Correct, and then she really gets a spotlight in this episode, which I think is cool because it's part of the story.
She is fascinating.
100%.
Like Glimpses from Olympias is great because you get all that background about her, and she maybe had her husband killed, Alexander's father, maybe responsible for his death, slept with snakes, maybe, right? Like just
I would say that's more likely. I would say that's definitely. I mean, given her.
You think it's likely she slept with snakes?
Given her religious affiliation,
right? It's possible.
Philip and Olympias met at the rites of Eleusis, which was this weird ritual that certain people would be indoctrinated into when they're kind of like what's that weird grove that they take people?
The one that Rogan's always talking about with Alex Jones.
It was like that. It's like you're going to be the next king of this part of the world, so we're going to put you through this kind of ritual. Basically, it prepared you for the after. It prepared you for death,
And some of the thought is that they're doing some psychedelic chemicals, some tainted wine or something.
I think there was psilocybin definitely involved in that ritual. And it prepared you for death. And they said that no one can really truly see the world unless they've been through the rites of Eleusis. As I believe, Philip and Olympias met at the rites of Eleusis.
So they're tripping balls. He meets this chick, thinks she's great, marries her, knocks her up, finds out that she's actually really not great because she's actually hard to be married to, strong woman, but maybe not just strong, maybe a little crazy. She might sleep with snakes and have had him murdered. So
I guarantee you she was good at that.
Maybe
she's got the crazy factor.
That helps.
Let's zoom into the Philip II of Macedon being murdered thing just very quickly. Okay.
Yeah.
There's two things, just like the death of Alexander, which I really hope we get into before the end of this episode.
Of course.
There's two things about the death of Philip, okay? One is that Olympias was being sidelined. Philip took multiple wives, and he claimed that the kid of his new wife this is going to be my new successor. He had disputes with Alexander, banished him for a period of time, and then brought him back and had to command his armies and stuff like that, But then Olympias very much saw herself as being sidelined, and her child not being in line to rule, the kingdom.
Yeah.
Sure.
So maybe okay. So and then there is one of Philip's guards who was fed to some mule drivers as a sex toy by Philip, and then later assassinated him. Okay, so that also happened. Now, did Olympias know about this and use this guy to do that? That
Maybe.
is a very easy way into his inner circle. And the guy was killed immediately after the assassination. So
you could just imagine like a Fatal Attraction thing where she's like, she seduces this guy and convinces him to kill him. You know what I mean? Like,
or just his pride. I mean, anybody who's,
that too.
Yeah, right.
Well, he had a reason. There was motive.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, dude, lots of people had a motive to kill Philip II, right?
I think he was proclaiming himself a god. He had a big statue of himself out there alongside the other gods.
Yeah, but that's pretty standard. I mean, if you go back to the ancient world, like declaring yourself a god when you were ruler, like they kind of all did that. I mean, Augustus did that. A bunch of them did that.
I think what you're speaking to, George, is something that I really wanted to talk about as well, is that what the actual court of Macedonia looked like at that time. This was kind of like a barbaric kingdom where Philip raised it up, revolutionized the army, gained some legitimacy in the region, and then was, comporting himself as a contemporary of Greece, which, it was probably not considered to be at the time. But according to contemporary accounts, it was very much the court of Philip was barbarism. It was drunken revelries and very nasty things going on. Has anybody seen that? Have you guys seen that old Alexander the Great movie starring Richard Burton?
I have not. I heard about it, but I have not.
I think the beginning of that movie shows more of his early life, anyways, as is depicted there, and it kind of shows more what that court was kind of like. You know what I mean? And so this is Philip raising himself up, and he did an immense amount on his own. To the level of legitimacy of the neighboring nation states, and he even, got,
honing his armies so that they could go kick the crap out of all these Greek city-states.
Absolutely correct, yeah, that's absolutely correct. There's this cool BBC dramatization of Alexander's early life, which I just threw up in the Discord in correspondence with this recording, and it shows the kind of things that we don't know much about Alexander's early life, but kind of growing up in that environment, it illuminates it a little bit.
Fun. Alexander's life is fascinating, but the focus of this episode is the aftermath of his death. So let's jump to his death first, Matt. What are your thoughts on his death, and then we'll go into the rest of it.
Okay, so my older brother is the one who really got me into history. Now, I will continually cite him as a person I respect for me being here talking to you today. Okay. And he talks about, like, the things he got him into history was reading about Alexander the Great. And when I was older, I asked, how did Alexander die? And he gave me this story. And a few years ago, I asked him for the source of this story, and I think he can't remember where it came from, or I don't remember. But according to him, Alexander was traveling with his army back from India, and they were floating on a ship back down a river, okay? And his headscarf fell off into the river, and one of his soldiers swam out and retrieved it and said, "Here you go, sir." And he put it back on his head, and from this infected water, he contracted malaria, okay? So that is a story, okay? Now, let's look at another possible non-assassination theory for the death of Alexander. This man was a warrior in the truest sense of the word. He led his troops from the front.
A lot of wounds.
Yeah, a lot of wounds. And what did they do back in that day? They threw up from the outside. I looked into the death of Alexander, and it could have been bowel perforation. Like, it could have been tipped up from the outside. The bowel was still opened a little bit, and some bowel material, some material leaked out.
Well, then you get sepsis.
Became septic. But yeah, you got sepsis and slowly died. That would be consistent with the conditions that we're seeing around his death. Now let's look at the conspiracy side of it. Alexander was absolutely taking on heirs. He wanted to rule Asia. He ruled from Babylon. He comported himself as a Persian ruler. He had his own men, his generals, these men who became kings after he died, bowing and scraping the floor and crawling towards him to kiss his feet when they approached him in the throne room. These are men who had saved his life in battle, who had carved out the kingdom that he ruled, and he demanded equal treatment with the Persian culture. This is
Yep.
if you're someone who fought beside him and you're forced to act like that, you're like, this is too much, dude. Like, you're calling yourself a god. I have to kiss your feet. I know you. I grew up with you.
Yeah.
You are more. Yeah. So there's
Well,
both sides of it again.
Well, the question is, do you think that was forced upon them, or do you think that they willingly did that because he was such a great leader? I don't know. I mean,
no.
So they
them calling coercion towards the throne.
So they worshipped him instead.
Alexander was forcing his Greeks, Macedonian soldiers, to incorporate the culture of Persia into their daily lives, like wearing pants and all this kind
Basically,
of stuff.
what I remember in reading this is that he kind of went Persian.
Okay.
Yeah,
and the Persian tradition was even, the Persian tradition was the emperor is a god.
Okay.
And that was not the Macedonian tradition. But once they took over Persia, he started banging some Persian chicks, acting pretty Persian.
So then he took it to heart.
And he became the king of kings.
Yeah.
Right? Instead of being the traditional warlord, basically, of the Macedonians.
Straight up. Yeah,
and
I agree with that.
I think Matt's right. You could see why the generals would be like, dude, what the hell are you talking about? You wouldn't be here without me.
Yep.
Why wouldn't they kill him?
That's what Matt's saying.
And that's what Matt's saying. Right, then why wouldn't they?
Yeah.
There's another factor. Hephaestion died first of the same conditions.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Could Hephaestion have been considered a successor to Alexander?
So somebody poisoned him first, and then
were they testing the poison? Were they removing a successor first? Were they
or they missed and got Alexander, or got him first, right? The poison went to the wrong guy.
Or did Alexander give him malaria?
I don't think it was malaria. I don't think it was malaria. I've never heard that story anywhere else. That's fascinating. Maybe it's a thing, but who knows? We'll never know. That's why it's fun. Okay, so he dies.
Yep.
Now we're to the part that happens to coincide with the actual podcast. Alexander's dead. Basically, shit hits the fan, right? Matt,
the person in possession of Alexander's corpse is going to be the ruler of his empire, and the person who buries him is seen as their successor according to their traditions. There was a convoy taking Alexander's body, and Ptolemy intercepted this with an army, I believe, and said, "It's mine now. I'm taking it to Egypt, and I'm ruling from Alexandria."
Right, and his people ruled in Egypt literally until Cleopatra.
Absolutely correct.
Well, just to correct something, malaria cannot be passed from one person to another unless an organ transplant occurs or a blood transfusion.
Right.
Transfusion occurs.
So he probably didn't give him malaria.
I just wanted to.
Right. No, I appreciate that.
Possible.
So Matt, the thing that's interesting, right, is there's some argument. If I remember correctly, isn't it possible that Ptolemy was related to Alexander?
I don't know that actually. I think there might have been this relation there. Yeah.
I thought Dan said something about maybe they were half brothers.
Okay.
Like the rumor was that Ptolemy was a bastard child of Philip or something like that.
Wow.
Which, if you think about it, then that means Cleopatra was literally related to Alexander the Great. 200 years later, banging Caesar.
Which is amazing to think about.
It is. It's fascinating. Yeah. It all ties together.
It does.
So all that chaos, right. All the chaos that's going on, and you got to imagine what it was like for those people to live through that, right? If the regular, ordinary people living in that empire,
and
if the most powerful person in the world just died, and everybody's scrabbling for their bit of that power. It's
right
with no succession plan. It's the most. It's the most powerful empire in the world up for grabs. That is
right.
He calls it a soap opera, like people turning on people, like people who have fought next to each other in all these battles that carved this empire now said, "You are my enemy. I will take this." people having to claim their own achievements instead of being lauded by their peers.
Right.
It's very much what happens when power is grasped for.
Right.
No.
You
My take on this wasn't necessarily Alexander's death when we discussed this previously.
Mhm.
It was more like, what are the odds that you're going to have a leader, one that fights in the front of the line, survives, two, can lead all of these other great men, in battle, and three, when he got the keys to the car, he actually knew how to drive it. You know what I mean? Like, what are the odds?
Right.
Yeah,
He was
that's a
exceptional.
good point.
And because he had two really exceptional parents, the chances of him being exceptional are higher.
Maybe.
No, I mean, it's just genetics, right? And that doesn't mean it's a guarantee, but it is higher.
So at this point, people weren't really interested in carving out more empires. They were interested in like retaining the power that they had. Alexander had designated some of his generals to be the satraps, the governors of some of these various provinces, like Bactria, which is Afghanistan nowadays. And they're like, okay, yeah, you're right, Scott. There is no more Alexander after Alexander. No one took up the flame and said, we are going to continue this campaign as Alexander wished. They're like, you know what? I'm already governor of this province. This is my territory now, and I will be king of this territory, and so will my children after me. There was no more further conquest. It was very much settling down into the power that had been established.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a fascinating point of history, because imagine something similar happening now. There's not one person that could die that would cause this much chaos. And that's because we built our systems to try to avoid that, because we got to see these examples. So we have a constitution that lays out but there wouldn't be anything like this because they don't have the power.
Well, but within their own country.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be. It was small scale. I'm talking about like this for the whole world. Like, even if the leader of China, Xi Jinping, dies, it wouldn't erupt in chaos all over the world.
No, his successor would just be chosen.
Well, no, they'd be backstabbing each other like crazy to be the successor, and it would be bloody in China, but not like warlord bloody. It would be like tens of hundreds of people maybe dying, not millions.
Yeah.
I mean, here you had whole armies going to war, which has happened a bunch of times. Look at how many times brothers have fought brothers when the king died. All the time, right? Charlemagne, all through history. So part of what the beauty of modern liberal democracies bring is stability. One of the biggest things is stability and succession.
Yeah.
And that's because they saw all this for all these centuries and like, we can't let this happen. More people die that way than almost any other way.
Well, look at Rome.
Power and very relevant to Pax, which we're seeing a lot of Roman.
That's what I was just about to say, Matt.
Right
on, man.
Exactly.
Yeah, and Pax, you go through it and you're like, shit, man. It's like every few years, even though it was a Pax Romana, right? They were still fighting each other to be the ruler.
Civil wars. They still have civil wars over who's going to be the ruler, like who's going to be the next emperor. And
that's how they ended up with an empire in the first place.
Yep.
You know, Caesar, Pompey, Crassus, just fighting tooth and nail, and eventually Caesar comes out on top. And then you get Augustus and all that. I mean, it's just the peaceful transfer of power is one of the best things about our modern society.
Absolutely.
And most people take it for granted because they don't study history.
Yeah, until we see something like January the 6th and we see what can happen when the peaceful transfer of power. Or they can just look at some banana republic in South America or something, where people were shooting themselves. Yeah, and it's not that far off in America if you want to go there.
It could be very easily back there, man.
Yeah, we saw how close we are to achieve something like that. I think out of everyone in the succession of Alexander, Ptolemy was obviously the winner. He took Alexander's body back to Alexandria, and probably had the most successful reign after that.
Now, I believe there was some people, some of the generals, who's had some dynasties that were close, maybe, or at least one or two of them.
It's the Lucid Empire, yeah.
Right,
They did pretty good, yeah.
Right, like, they were around for quite a while. Still, their descendants.
Yeah, and then we're digging up evidence of the integration between East and West in those empires nowadays. We're finding
Right.
so this general of Alexander ruled over this part of Western Asia, and then for a while the people of the West, Greece and Macedonia, saw this as a new place to colonize, or were invited to go there, or incited to go there, right? And said, hey, come here and do this.
It was opportunity.
Right, and then they went and built, cities, towns and houses, and we're finding Roman architecture in Western Asia that is a product of this integration and the aftermath of Alexander's death and those empires.
Exactly. Back to Wrath of the Khans and Genghis Khan, right? What he talks about at the beginning, the benefits of these historical arsonists, not anything they meant to be. But there are benefits in the long run.
Yeah.
It's just you have a lot of death in the short term.
I think that's an important point. Is because one thing that Dan talks about is was Alexander trying? Did he have this? And this is portrayed in popular media too, the movie Alexander, starring Colin Farrell, which Dan doesn't like it. I dig it for certain things, and other things not so much. It's a very accurate depiction of the Battle of Gaugamela, what would be the second Battle of Gaugamela, which they don't specify in the movie. But in that movie they depict Alexander as having this great vision of integrating East and West. Dan is more of the side of, was he just a bloody conqueror? And absolutely yes, he was a bloody conqueror who was out to forge an empire based on his own glory and his notions of aspiring to the legacy of Achilles and things like that. And so that is an arsonist. That is somebody who just goes out and torches the world for their own name, and then these things happen afterwards, sort of accidentally, but sort of beneficially as well.
Yeah.
Well, and to expand on that, Dan doesn't like that, like that aspect
what he's trying to say is don't give him credit for that.
Yeah, but
because that wasn't the goal.
Just said earlier in the podcast, though, when if Alexander was Persianized, that influence, led into the rest of his campaign.
Well, and then the biggest influence was the Hellenization of Asia, adding that Greek feel.
He did want his. He did. I'm not going to call it ask. I'm not going to call it order, but they're his soldiers and lieutenants and some of his higher-ranking officers did intermarry with the Persian people, and that's because he wanted to integrate these empires. Call it that what you will for peace, because that's how you do it. You go conquer a place, you marry the princess, and now everybody's peaceful because the rule has been established. He's trying to do that all the way down the chain of command. And also because he needed a bigger army to continue his campaign.
Sure.
For sure.
So one of the things then that I was just thinking about though is who the longest reign of one particular family.
That's a good one. I think yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, Scott's getting himself a drink. Go ahead, Matt. I
read something somewhere where a descendant of Genghis Khan lived way further than you might think so, and that a little semblance of his empire lasted, well into not exactly the modern age, but way beyond where you'd think it would have been. And
that's a good one.
Yeah. So,
but not William the Conqueror, good, right? Not
William the Conqueror, good one. Calling back to your own episode.
I can't think of one besides that. I mean, and there must be probably before we were writing shit down, maybe. The Assyrians were rulers for so long, right? You go back to how long the Assyrians were dominating the Middle East. There might have been a millennia or two of one family, or Egypt. There might have been.
Very contained within their own region. Assyrians, Egyptians, right? Alexander's legacy, maybe Ptolemy was related to him. His, his kings, his generals who became kings. did rule his whole empire, which was vast for many, many, many generations. And
Right.
and as you say, all the way the Ptolemaic dynasty lasted for hundreds of years up until Cleopatra when it was taken
Mm-hmm.
down when she was taken down by Octavius.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just interesting to think about, like,
Yeah.
because that's how amazing the freaking William the Conqueror's conquering was, though, because there's still super rich family, kind of in charge in England, like a little bit, right?
Yep.
Not really
Yeah.
in charge, but like nominally the royalty. That's 1,000 years. That's
not,
1,000 years.
I'm not English, but I don't
They
understand
did
how
pretty
that
well.
works.
Right.
That doesn't make sense, though.
Right.
What's the purpose of the royal family?
Yeah, it's tradition. And, I used to make fun of it. Like, okay, why do we still have to have a king and queen? You guys are being ridiculous.
Yeah.
But then now I see, as I get older, this young people tendency to just want to throw out everything that's old, burn it down because they can do better.
Sure.
In America especially, we don't have that super long tradition that we point to that everybody has in common.
Yeah, but the country isn't that even old.
Right,
It's
I
not
know.
even old.
And there's a benefit to that, and there's a drawback. But I mean, it is a good idea to have stuff that everybody agrees on.
Yeah.
And we did have that, but we don't have it anymore.
Yeah.
We had that with George Washington. We had that stuff, but that's been torn down. So what do we all agree on anymore?
Would you say we had that during Abraham Lincoln?
What do you mean? During the time of Abraham Lincoln, you mean? Like there was everybody liked George Washington.
Yeah, but not everybody had the same values under Abraham.
100%.
How about Jefferson? Do I say Jefferson?
No, you missed what I'm saying. I think I didn't speak well. I just believe that for the country to do better, for any country to do better, okay, there is something to it that they have something that everybody agrees. This is good. This is what we do, and this is what makes us us.
Sure.
Okay, and in America, it can't be an ethnicity. We don't have that, which is good. There's a lot of benefits to that, right?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be the founding myth, right? It's supposed to be the Constitution. And that, if we could get back to that, I think it would be good for America. But because you need that. You need that makes everything you. Otherwise, you have. So if we get back to the podcast, like, what was it? What was it for the Macedonians, right? What was it for Alexander? It was conquering. It was just being the toughest. Which historically,
very good point. That brings back to your original point to the strongest. Like who
Right.
deserves, who rules, who is smart enough, if you want to call it that, to
Right.
to take on this empire. It's the person who is strong enough to have made it in the first place.
right, and that historically has been the most common thing, right?
It has.
So
it has, yeah.
the idea of nation states kind of can help you get around that. Hey, whoever's strongest leads, because you're creating this common identity.
Yeah.
And there's good and bad about nation states, right? But one of the good things is you can have this common identity that is not resulted on conquering. It's not resulted on you benefiting yourself over the other
Very good
people.
point. Very good
Thank you.
point.
It's
The
just
distinction between the strongest ruling and reason ruling is the basis of the United States Constitution with our checks and balances. Like,
right,
absolutely.
because they saw the founders grew up in a time in the Enlightenment where they were studying all of this ancient history.
They were.
They were studying Rome. They were studying
Absolutely.
Greece. They were studying
Yep.
Alexander.
Yep.
They were
Yes, they
looking
were.
at all of this and going, okay, let's build a system that tries to protect against all of these bad things and limit the ability of ambitious men to do harm. Right? That was the
Straight up.
idea of the Constitution.
Yep. But not all ambitious men.
No, the point is though, yes, no, but the point is to limit their ability, because in general, you will end the people who are ambitious and are willing to do harm are more likely to end up in power.
Yeah.
Just by the very nature of humans, like that can happen. Now, can you get somebody who's like an Abraham Lincoln?
Sure.
Yes. But those guys are not everyday guys.
For sure.
So the system is supposed to work so well. The system works by limiting the power of the ambitious, knowing that they're going to be corrupted. So we limit their power, and the system basically is made to function well with incompetence or bad leaders, which I think you could argue is pretty accurate. Think about how many presidents that you would say were actually great presidents.
Few and far between. That's why they're remembered.
Right. Like, think about it. Really think about it. How many presidents would you look back and be like, man, that guy nailed it?
Yeah.
Maybe 10.
Maybe. Right? Maybe 10.
Maybe 10.
We're on 40 some.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe 10. And yet we're still America. We're still here.
Yeah.
Right? Think about other countries. Right? If they had that level of incompetence, would they still have been a country historically, right? Would you still be a country if you had that bad of a run of leaders?
No.
No, you'd be gone.
Well,
your neighbors would have conquered you. Maybe.
Dan calls that the roll of the iron dice. I mean, you don't know what you're getting.
Right, and usually what happens is you get those down periods where you get conquered.
Sure, but we have down periods here too.
But we don't get conquered.
You're right, and we also don't have down periods for 60 years.
Because you get a 4 or 8 year terms.
Yeah, because you have 4 or 8 year terms.
Yeah, that's the beauty of the system.
Yeah.
And I think the system is robust enough that we can get back to it. Anyway, go ahead, Matt. What are you going to say?
Yeah, there's two things here. One is that Alexander did sort of have a succession plan established when he was assigning these generals to their territories. You are the governor of Bactria. You're the governor of Egypt. And so, hey, look, you are a great person. You feel you might be equal to me. You are a contender for my throne. Here's something to keep you occupied and placated. Okay, yeah. And then when he died, they did take these territories. So in his lifetime, he was satiating these people with their portion of power.
Exactly.
But after
sharing
they died,
the spoils.
After they died, they did dispute because it was still the reign of one man,
and he knew that was going to happen.
Right, because at that time you were a king, and your children succeed your empire as ruler. There didn't need to be a ruler as we saw it split up, and it did kind of okay for a while. These people hadn't fought for themselves, but they were fighting for that one position. It's like fighting over President of the United States when they could be fighting over Western America and Eastern America. Like just have your portion of power. The succession of kings by bloodline is a major problem, and that's something we've definitely got away from in America to our great benefit.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, would England be the way England is today if it wasn't for America?
Well, no, they had already started taking the power away from the king.
Yeah, into the parliament, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that happened before America, and that's kind of interesting.
You think that social revolution would have gone through?
That's a what if that we could never know. Because imagine there was no Revolutionary War. Maybe the people here, the founders, influenced England even more if they were a part of the Commonwealth. Maybe Thomas Jefferson and John Adams and James Monroe, maybe they end up influencing the world even more.
But we weren't.
Who knows?
That's the point.
I don't know.
We were just subjects.
No, but my point is there were people in Parliament that were pushing for the colonist side, right?
Sure.
And what if there was an agreement reached to let them actually be represented and actually be citizens? Who knows? It could be.
That's the thing. That's the thing. American representation in British Parliament. Like, what would that have looked like? You know what I mean?
Right.
Would that have settled everything down? That's something that's coming up very contemporarily in the news lately. And if people in the outlying regions of a place that is currently in conflict have been allowed representation, that's what I'm going to bring this back, though, without getting too touchy.
Sure.
Romans knew this, okay? They brought the Gauls into the Senate. Like, they knew, okay, you are now, we rule you, but you are part of our governmental system, so you have representation, and now you feel equal. Therefore, there is no need for conflict.
They were citizens.
Was smart. They were smart.
They were citizens of the Roman Empire. Yeah. Well, look at how many wars they fought over citizenship before they were the empire, right? Because the Roman citizens did not. You can take that if you need to. The Roman citizens.
No, that was by a war.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's okay.
The Roman citizens did not want to share their citizenship with the other Italian cities, and so they fought a whole civil war about that with the other Roman or the other Italian cities.
Yeah. But
then once they were the empire, it was, hey, if you're in the Roman Empire, you're a citizen.
No, I want to back up a little.
It's the hardest thing to give up is that little bit of power and voice in your own, call it a democratic system. But it is the most smart in the long run. You can't. Subjugation of a people will always turn out the same way, like rebellion.
Right.
Like it's always going to happen. If you include them and make yourselves equal, at least in name, the Romans put clauses in.
Yeah,
when they incorporated some of those territories, they put clauses in there. They're like, hey, you didn't read the fine print. You don't get to vote on things.
Right.
But if you include them in his system, and what did Alexander do? Did he include? He was equalizing East and West,
Yeah.
But
and who knows? He didn't rule long enough to really know what it would have looked like.
No, exactly. And so we just saw the power struggle, the same old thing happening again.
Yeah, and then he dies, and that's what happens when you don't have a system like ours. When you don't have that robust shit hits the fan, and millions of people die.
No, correct. About a line of success.
Yeah, you have to have a plan, and you have to have everybody who's involved in that plan on board with the plan. And a lot of times that fails, even when they have a plan. Like, what was it? I think it was Charlemagne, or was it his kid?
No,
that he left it to. They left it to his 3 sons. Look at how many times that's happened, right? In European history, they left the kingdom. They split up the kingdom to the 3 sons or the 2 sons, and then what happens? They go to war because I want to run the whole thing. Yeah, that's just the way it is. All right, but we should probably wrap this up. It's getting late. Any final thoughts?
Well, one thing,
that was fun.
I know we touched base on this, and I know we're going to talk about PAX soon anyway. But it's interesting since we brought the Romans into this. It's interesting to understand that the reason why we have issues in Israel and Palestine now is because of the Romans.
Maybe there was issues there before that, though.
Yeah, but not like this.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, they were constantly. Somebody was always conquering Jerusalem. Somebody's always conquering everywhere in that whole region, in all of the regions, right?
They talked about.
PAX. That was one of the most interesting things of that book.
The siege of Jerusalem was very. Oh my
fascinating.
God! Yeah, that hit me.
That's when they instituted the state of Palestine,
right?
The country of Palestine,
right. But we'll get to that when we do the book club. That's going to be actually. What an interesting time to talk about that, because it does. That's what's so crazy is that region now is still playing out stuff that's been going on for 2,000, 3,000 years.
Straight up.
Everything's so old there.
They still remember the history.
Old.
They're living it out day by day.
Well,
in the Ghost of the Ostfront trivia, or when we were talking about that, we were talking about the Russians and the Germans very much remembering the history of 70 years ago, and the people in the Middle East right now are remembering and acting out the history of thousands of years ago.
Yeah, it just makes it so much harder to get past it.
Yep.
Okay, Matt, thanks for joining us. Let me ask you one. Okay, I like to finish with this. Matt, what are you listening to or reading now?
So I started reading that history of the steppe people that Dan was referring to with his guest, and it is encyclopedic and fantastic. But I also started reading that other book called The Face of Battle, which is very interesting. It's the breakdown of what ancient warfare was like. So that was cool. And then for the book club up,
right.
Yeah, right. And then for the book club, I've been reading PAX, which I recommend everyone get into.
It's fun. All right, Scott.
I'm
PAX?
reading PAX as well. Yep.
I've been enjoying that. I finished it. It's great.
And then I also started the first 10 minutes of Ghost of the Ostfront Part 3, so I can start
writing the trivia questions. I'm gonna kick Matt's ass.
I am concerned going up against you, George.
Do not be concerned. Do not be concerned.
We'll see.
So I just listened to the 4th episode of the Rest is History new series on Baghdad. Matt, Scott, it's so fascinating.
I haven't listened to it,
dude. The nice thing, what is great about the Rest is History is they're 45 minutes.
Yeah,
they're a nice little easy. You got a 45-minute drive, you can finish a whole episode, right? And I love Dan's long form stuff. Don't get me wrong, I am not complaining about that. But hardcore history is, I mean, the Rest is History is nice.
Yeah.
The Baghdad series is fascinating because he starts before Baghdad was ever formed and gives you a couple 100-year history about that area and that region before they even, so the whole first episode doesn't even talk about Baghdad.
No.
And it's about Baghdad. And right now, the 4th one, they just finished with, Arabian Nights and all that stuff. I've learned so much I did not know. It's great.
So what George is referring to is the podcast, The Rest of History, done by historian Tom Hallman, and they're doing a several episode series about Baghdad, which I've been very much looking forward to getting into, but I've been stuck on the news and then doing my homework for the book club. So that's next on my list. Yeah,
it's definitely you know what, Matt? What I find for me, what works good is to change it up. So when I was listening to PAX, it would start to get a little too much. So then I would go flip over and listen to the Baghdad stuff and let go of the news for a while, or get off Twitter for a while and listen to something else. It helps. It helps me keep it fresh and keep it interesting.
Yeah,
it's changing it around a little bit. All right, but thank you everybody for watching. Matt, thanks for joining us. This was great. We'll see you on Tuesday for the book club. Remember, people, the October 24th. 10 p.m. in the Discord channel at the link in the description. Even if you just read a little bit of PAX, come on and talk about it. We might not even get through the whole book. It's going to be a fun discussion. We're going to make it into an episode of the podcast.
Even if you just know about that part of Roman history, you can join. Yeah, you're in the discussion, so you don't
just
have
come
to
and
read
have
the book.
Right.
Yep.
If you love history, if you love Roman history, or if you're thinking about reading PAX, it might be a good way to come on and hear it.
And then you get some idea what the book's about.
Yeah, it's fun. All right, I hope to see everybody there, and you have a good night. Thanks for watching.
Cheers.
Peace.